Hello, Bobby Torres of Frightbox Recording here, and welcome to Polished Home Studio Production, Part 1. Now in this 3-part video series, I'll be showing you how I took a simple, inexpensive 8-channel interface, as well as a handful of inexpensive microphones and a single SM57 and produced an entire track from top to bottom. Recording, editing, mixing, and mastering, all while working in unconventional, non-studio spaces. The truth is that you can make great recordings anywhere with virtually any gear. The problem is that most people don't know where to start or where to focus their attention when it comes to a full production. They end up becoming obsessed over microphone selection, plugins, high-end preamps, things that really don't matter in the big picture. And I know because I was there, believe me. When I started out, I wasted years spending money on gear I later found out I didn't even need in the first place. The problem I had back then is that I was so obsessed with the tools that I never focused on things like capturing proper performances, getting tones right at the source, editing when things needed to be edited, and I gotta say, all of the misinformation on the internet really didn't help me any. Now, luckily, after years of trial and error on my own, I was able to intern out of a bigger studio and actually see real records being made in the real world. I quickly learned that a large majority of the stuff I was obsessed with was a waste of time. I should have been focusing on my process and not so much on the tools I was using. And I will be proving this point within this 3-part series. Now in part 1, I'll be covering my approach to drum production. In part 2, I'll be covering how I track guitars, bass, and vocals. And finally, in part 3, I'll be showing you my mixed breakdown on how I mixed this song that was recorded with very, very inexpensive gear, again in non-studio spaces, but still somehow produced a professional, fully mastered result. I also want to mention this, I'm not even going to be using drum samples for this production, all natural drums. And just to be ultra thorough, I will be remixing the song using only EZdrummer. So you will witness how I approach producing live drums, as well as how I use EZdrummer in a final mix, because in reality, I do both. Now, before we dive into it, I just want to mention that you could download my free Polished Production checklist. It's a simple, to-the-point PDF checklist that highlights all of the key points that I cover within this 3-part series. You can download it for free and refer to it if you're serious about taking your productions to that truly professional level. There's a link to it below in this video's description. Okay, so with that being said, let's jump into it. Now, the song I'm gonna be recording is called Jep and Ramona Ain't Gonna Make It by the band King Kelly. Now, before I set up a single microphone and record drums or bass or guitars or vocals, I made sure I went in and recorded a fully fleshed out pre-production demo with all of my tempo mapping done, all of the kinks within the guitar performances and bass performances and even the drum performance all worked out. The singer made sure all of his lyrics were set in stone, so that way the production process will be smooth sailing. This is a huge mistake that a lot of people make when they record within their home studios. Most people believe, myself included once upon a time, that they don't have to take this step because they could record whenever they want. And believe me, this usually ends up leading to a never-ending project that often never gets done. There's a reason why all pro producers take this very crucial step. Now, pre-production does not have to be complicated or involved. The idea is that you want to hear all of the inner workings of the parts of your song in a crystal clear manner before you spend the time to tackle your production for real. Now, for the pre-production here, I used EZdrummer. It's super convenient. You could work out all of your parts, map out your tempos without having to set up microphones on your drum kit for real. So in other words, I didn't wait until drum tracking day to realize that my song was 165 BPM. This is a mistake that many bands make before they hit the studios. They don't take the time to map their tempos before they go in to record their drum tracks. And believe me, it will save you a ton of time in the long run. So as you can see, all of my tracks are color coded, and I didn't go insane recording a ton of overdubs or unnecessary parts that didn't serve the song. My goal here was to make sure that the song could stand on its own with only a handful of basic tracks. Let's check it out. As you can hear, it is not a radio-ready production by any means, but that's not the point of pre-production. The point of pre-production is to make sure that your song is fully fleshed out and ready to go before you record any of your real tracks. And I feel I've done a decent job of that and that we're pretty much ready to start recording some drums. So let's move on to dialing in our drum tones right at the source. Now the drum set I'll be using is a Yamaha Birch Custom, which is by means not a high-end kit at all. I picked it up for about $200 used, and the room we'll be recording the drums in is my project studio, which features no real acoustic treatment. Outside of just some basic foam on my walls and just whatever is in the room, again, there's no acoustic treatment. It's just a relatively dead, dry space. Now my drum heads are really beat up right now, so I'm gonna have to change them and get them nice and in tune before I even set up a single microphone. Now remember, I'm not using any drum samples within this production, so I wanna make sure these drums sound great at the source. And I'm not gonna let my untreated room or my cheap drum set get in the way of that. Now I've opted to keep the old head on my kick drum because it still sounds bright enough for this production. I tend to change my kick drum head about every third time I change my main heads, the heads on my toms and snare drum. Now because I'm going for a brighter tone with a lot of attack, I'm gonna use clear heads on my toms. So after I have my brand new head on my rack tom, I'm just turning each of the lugs so they're all at a rough approximate equal tension across the drum. After that, I'm applying a single moon gel just to cut down on some ring. And just like that, my tom is in tune and sounds way better than the dead head that existed on it previously. And right here, I'm repeating the exact same process, but with my floor tom. Swapping out for a new head, tuning each of the lugs so they're all equal, applying a moon gel. And again, I'm gonna rinse and repeat the same process except with my snare drum, which in my opinion is the most important element of your drum set, especially if you're not using drum samples. Okay, that's a nice medium tuning with a lot of pop, and I'm happy with that. Now for this drum recording, I'm just using my $300 Samson drum mic kit. It's got the kick mic, all of the close mics that attach to the toms and the snare drum, as well as just two small diaphragm pencil condenser mics to capture the cymbals. And I'm using my single SM57 as a room mic. Now to make my small dead room sound bigger than it is, I'm taking my SM57, pointing it away from my kit and at the shelf in the corner of my room. My goal here is to try and reject as much cymbal as possible while capturing mainly the reflections of my drums instead of the direct sound from my drums. Now I'm using a mini boom stand for my kick drum mic and I'm simply just placing it inside the resonant head of my kick drum. And because I'm using clip-on mics, I'm just clipping each of the individual mics on my rack tom, floor tom, my snare top, as well as my snare bottom. Now, in my opinion, by far, aside from getting your drums in tune, the most important thing to achieving a pro-level drum sound in your home studio is to avoid your hi-hat at all costs. Hi-hats are always extremely loud and can absolutely wreck your drum mix, which in turn can wreck your mix as a whole. Believe me, there's very little that you could do within the mix to help notch out the harsh frequencies of an annoyingly loud hi-hat. The way to do it is to record your cymbals right at the source. And the way I recommend doing this is to close mic your main crash cymbals. Even if you only have two condenser mics like I do in this production, close micing your crashes works great because you will still get plenty of hi-hat and ride cymbal, as well as any other additional cymbals, like for example, a China cymbal, in these two microphones. I'd rather have too little hi-hat in my overheads than too much. And believe me, having too little hi-hat in your overheads is a very, very, very rare occurrence. Now, even though I'm recording this in my studio, I'm not using any of my normal gear. I'm using this extremely stripped down small rig, which just contains my 8-channel interface, my 2 PreSonus micro monitors, and my laptop. That is it. Now for this track, I'll be having Mr. Greg Alders of the bands Toy Machine and The Cause and Cure laying down some drums for me. I wanted a rock solid drum performance that needed little tweaking in the mix, and Greg is the perfect drummer for the job. So now that our drums are nice and in tune at the source and all of our microphones are set up properly, let's get to recording our drum tracks. Take note that the entire song is completely mapped out with memory locations. This makes the process super straightforward and super simple in the event that we need to punch in any of the sections. And in this session, we had to do very, very little punching. Okay, so I'm super happy with this performance. Greg did a killer job and these drum tracks are near perfect. But even with that being said, I'm now gonna take the next step which most people neglect to take within their home studios, and that is drum editing. Now, I don't want these drum tracks sounding like a drum machine. I'm simply nudging the performance and pocketing very small sections just to make sure that all of the main hooks and that the backbone of the drum performance are in the pocket. I'm also cutting out any of the dead space on my tom tracks whenever Greg is not playing the toms. These are simple steps that all pro producers take in order to ensure that their production is polished and top notch. And you're gonna wanna do this well before you move on to your guitar tracks, bass tracks, or vocal tracks. Drums are the foundation of your production. So let's take a listen. Okay, so I'm extremely happy with this and I'm ready to move on to some bass tracks. Now, part 2 of this video series will be released on Wednesday, so be sure to check it out if you're interested in seeing how I go about tracking bass, guitar, acoustic guitar, and vocals in non-studio spaces with the same gear I've previously mentioned. If you found this video helpful, like, comment, subscribe, and share. And do not forget to click the little bell icon so you can be notified every time I upload one of my weekly videos on all things metal and rock production. You can both like and follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Links are in the description below. And again, be sure to download my polished production checklist. It contains all of the key takeaways from this video series, so download it if you're serious about taking your productions to that polished professional level. Until next time, happy recording.